You're listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday. We're here with Steve Moore. I almost jumped right into the concerns that I have. But Steve Moore's here with me today. There's been over 100 days since they've even looked at an appropriations bill in the House of Representatives. I think they're going to get started again. I just want to be encouraged, Steve, that these folks are going to act like they got something to do over the next month.
Well, good morning, Martha, and happy President's Day.
Thank you.
When we celebrate our greatest American, George Washington. So I was just writing a column on this morning before I came on your show. It is a complete mess in Washington right now. They are nowhere close to having a budget, and the deadline is March 1st. And if they don't have a budget agreed to it by March 1st, there will be a shutdown of government agencies, a first tranche, and then by March 8th, a number of other government departments will shut down. I'm against that. I think it's there are some times when it's appropriate to shut down the government, but right now we just have to deal with reality, in my opinion. And I want your reaction to this, Martha. First of all, the Republicans have, a 2 or 3 seat majority now in the House out of 435. So it is about as razor thin as you can possibly get. The last time I checked, Chucky Schumer ran the Senate and Joe Biden was in the White House. So the idea that Republicans are going to be able to get the kind of budget outcome we want, it ain't going to happen. It just isn't. The numbers just don't add up. And I just believe that if we have another government shutdown, you and I have lived through a lot of these, Martha, in my lifetimes, and 9 out of 10 times the media blames the Republicans on the shutdown. And so I think this is a mistake. I think they should agree. There's something called the Massey Amendment, named after Thomas Massey, who's a good fiscal conservative from Kentucky. And it basically says if they can't agree to a budget, then you just pass all the spending bills at last year's level minus 1%. And you know what? I think given the hand that we're dealt, let's just do that, get through this year, get Biden out of the White House, and then get somebody in the White House who cares about fiscal responsibility.
No, I agree with you. And I know that you are a strong supporter of President Trump, but that's basically the message Nikki Haley has been preaching. Yes. All around. She's basically said exactly that. I mean, it's a numbers game, whether you're talking about abortion policy, whether you're talking about budget, whether you're talking about aid for Ukraine. It's a numbers game. And whether you like it or not, we don't have a 40-seat majority in the House. And it's just
nothing even close to that. Right.
That's right.
Right. And the other thing we need to do, and I mentioned this last week on your show, but I want to repeat it, is that if we're going to pass new spending, quote, emergency spending bills, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's Israel, whether it's the border, everything has to be offset with other spending cuts. I just looked at these numbers literally a half hour ago before I came on your show. Do you know how much the United States government spends per household in America today?
I don't know. Tell me.
Let's take $50,000 for every household in America. Folks, are you getting your money's worth? Are you getting $50,000 worth of government benefits?
Probably not.
This is so outrageous how obese our government is today, and we just keep adding on it. And this is not just an economic security crisis, it's a financial security crisis because we're borrowing so much to pay for all that spending. It's a story that does not have a happy ending. So you got to look. If Joe Biden is reelected president, God forbid, the spending is going to continue to go through the roof. That's all there is to it. That's why this election is critical. And I don't want to be sidelined by a little talk about, should we cut, $1 billion more out of this program, $1 billion more? No, we have to cut. And by the way, I said I favor the 1% cut in the Massey Amendment. But in my opinion, we've got to start cutting 10 to 20% out of these government agencies.
I think there must be something in the water in Kentucky because, Rand Paul also has this proposal out there where he says, okay, let's go back to 2019 spending. before COVID,
Yep.
because we are still,
Yep.
I reminded my listeners earlier, we are still spending every dollar of COVID money every year, even though we haven't been in COVID for a couple of years. Okay.
Yes.
Because
Yep.
we never
Yep.
reduced
Yep.
the budget from what we
That's right.
increased it. So
That's right.
if you went back to 2019 spending and basically you could balance the budget if you went back to
Yes.
2019 spending. You might
Yes.
have to add
Yes.
some more for defense. You might have to add some more in some couple of areas. It would be nothing like we're dealing with right now. And I think that makes a lot
That's
of
true.
sense. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think most Americans would agree with you. And, what we did, and this has been kind of why government always grows over time, is that when we have a crisis like when we had COVID, and a lot of that was just manufactured, but, we increased the budget by $1.5 trillion to deal with the government shutdowns and so on. And then what happened when it was over, instead of going back to, what we were spending before, we just permanently put that higher level of spending in play. And so you're exactly right. And ladies and gentlemen, what's the result of that? $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion deficits for as far as the eye can see.
Yes. Yes. And, you've still got the president going around saying that he cut the debt by, he hasn't cut the debt. All he's done is add to it. And to me, it's
what
disqualifying.
Kind of math is that?
It's disqualifying that he doesn't know the difference between debt and deficit. And I tell you what, we had this horrible thing happen in Russia on Friday where the dissident was killed. And
yes.
And there was a clip that was played around from President Biden from 3 years ago talking about this. You can tell, you listen to this clip 3 years ago and you listen to what he said about it recently. Steve, the man is in cognitive decline. I don't want to say it. I don't want to be mean. I don't want to be hurtful.
Okay.
But you can listen to a clip from 3 years ago and a clip from last week, and there is no doubt that he is not the person he was 3 years ago. And if people think it's going to get better, it's not.
It's a great point, and I just have to assure your listeners, because I was invited to go to the Trump Super Bowl party a week ago Sunday, and got to sit next to him for a while. We talked for 20 minutes, and I have to just tell you, there is no diminishment of his mental faculties that I can see. It's amazing. And I think they're about the same age, but Trump, he just doesn't stop, and his mind
he's about
all his faculties are there.
He's about 3. He'd never drank or smoked, but he ate a lot of hamburgers. So that's okay. It's okay. Listen, I want to ask you this question, and you might not be able to answer me because it's a conversation with the president. Do you because my biggest problem with him, I don't care about the demeanor. I don't care about, honestly, there's a few things. He never talks about budgets. He never talks about spending.
I know.
Do you ask him that?
I love the guy too, and I know you don't love him as much as I do, but
no, I don't love him as much as you do. But that's okay. We can still be friends, can't we, Steve?
Yeah, of course, of course. My only point is that as someone who really admires him greatly, worked with him, I think he did great things for our country. But you're right. Politicians don't like to cut spending. It's that simple, and so we've got to get him to cut the spending too, because it is the single biggest problem for our country right now. And the idea we're going to send all this money to all these countries abroad when we don't have any, folks, we're out of money. The credit card, we've surpassed our credit limit. And so, Ronald, even Ronald Reagan, who's the most fiscally conservative president we've ever had, in the last, 60 years, even he was not able to get the budget balance. So it's a syndrome in Washington that is just so sinister. It's one of the reasons I've been a big advocate of term limits, because these people come to Washington and say they're going to cut the budget, and then the next thing you know, they're loading on more spending.
And look, I am sure in 1976, that was the first election that I ever voted in. So, I was very young. But I am sure in 1976, there were people telling Ronald Reagan to get out of the race, to let Gerald Ford have it, and not to go all the way to the convention. And what I say to you is I think it's good for the process that I think that Nikki Haley should stay in. Yeah. I think she ought to go all the way to the convention, because I think her going to the convention with whatever number of delegates she has will be a good thing for the conversation in the party.
Look, at some point, she has, if she loses South Carolina, it's pretty much a fait accompli that Biden will be the nominee. So, but look, I mean, she has every right to stay in the race if she wants to, and it's a free country, and so that would be fine. But I think it's much more likely that Joe Biden will not be the Democratic nominee than that Trump will be. And by the way, when I say my prayers tonight, and please keep this guy healthy enough so he can run for president, because I think Trump will beat him pretty badly, and I don't want them to switch horses, but we'll see.
We'll see what happens.
Martha, one thing on the way out, Martha, I forgot to ask you. We're doing a poll of conservative opinion leaders, and you're one of the most important in the country. If Trump is the nominee, who would you like him to see to pick as his vice presidential candidate?
I'd love to see him pick Nikki Haley, because I think
Nikki Haley. Okay, I'm going to put you down for Nikki Haley.
But I think it's looking like Vivek Ramaswamy.
Okay, I'm going to put you down for. It's not who you think it will be; it's who you want him. And I'm going to put you down for Nikki Haley. That would be a pretty strong ticket.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
I'm so excited to be talking to Sarah Gabel, Seifert. You're going to be here this week for the Georgia Right to Life. The Georgia Life Alliance March for Life.
That's right. We will be marching, holding our Make More Babies signs, and we got a whole team there, and we cannot wait to stand proud. And we see this as a great opportunity to join the pro-life movement and fight for the unborn. And we're excited to be in Atlanta, Georgia.
And it's one of those things that I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the traditional diaper companies support issues that aren't about life. And that you are a part of a company, and we talked to Nick Ayers when this all kicked off a few months ago, that looks at this a different way. Tell us about that.
That's right. So EveryLife is the first and only pro-life diaper company that exists today. And the great news is that we are the fastest growing diaper company to ever exist in modern history. We launched in July, and we've seen great success. Not only do we have a premium, high-performing, clean product that parents are raving about, but more than that, we're a company that's unapologetically standing for life at the moment of conception. And we believe in parenthood. We believe in championing life. We believe in celebrating life at all costs. And we also are on the forefront of tackling different ideologies that are really damaging our country, one being population control ideologies. We actually launched a campaign in New York last month based upon Elon Musk's tweet that said having children is saving the world, and we believe that. We put it up on a sign in New York, Times Square, with a simple, loud and proud statement underneath that said, "Make more babies," and it actually went viral. We did a video alongside of that campaign. It's seen nearly 4 million views. Elon Musk himself actually retweeted us and endorsed our message. So now we're actually coming to Atlanta, Georgia. We're taking our Make More Babies campaign on the road, and we'll be there tomorrow near Centennial Park from 12 and through the end of the day. And we're going to be putting this sign up, too, saying make more babies, having children is saving the world, because we believe that children are our hope, they're our future. And we need more children, not less, Martha. So we're excited to be a company, again, that's on the forefront of tackling different cultural issues and really standing for life at all costs.
Sarah, I'm glad you're talking about that, because this is an issue that I hear a lot about. And look, I've been involved in the pro-life movement for a very long time. I was on the founding board of Georgia Life Alliance, and I served as their interim executive director last year. I ran for Congress in 2012 as a pro-life candidate and got the Susan B. Anthony endorsement. And so I've been in this issue for a very long time. And my children are 32 to 42, okay? And I see just in their age group, there's a lot of challenges and messages that they've had to deal with related to these issues. But what I've seen that's more hopeful and is that among 20-somethings, there's an uptick in church going. Among 20-somethings, there's more of a thought about having kids. The kids in their 30s, a lot of them are having one child or no children. And
right.
that is something, you know, in my age group, we never thought about that. We didn't overplan having children. You know, it was just something that we did, and we knew kind of about it. And we certainly had ways to have, quote, family planning. But it wasn't something that we consciously thought, well, I'm just going to have one child or no child. But I see a shift in the generation that's just behind that 30 to 40. Are you seeing that too in the numbers you're looking at?
I am seeing that. And we actually did a little bit of research and found that 44% of women and men that are in their younger years, about 18 to 44, are actually considering not having children at all. That's a large amount of the population saying that they no longer want to have children. And so I do think that this climate control messaging, that's really scaring young people into thinking that children are a threat to our society, or even this message from the pro-choicers that having children is an inconvenience, that it's a burden, that it's going to steal your opportunities and you're not going to be able to go after your dreams. What we're saying at EveryLife is the exact opposite. Children are an absolute gift and blessing and a reward from God. And that when you become a mother, when you become a father, there is no greater blessing. And we want to be a company that's celebrating these truths. And we do realize that we need more children in this world. We can't be a strong nation if we don't have strong families. How we really secure our country is knowing that we're building and we're securing generations to come. So I am hopeful for where we're going, but it does take more companies, it does take more individuals, it takes churches, it takes all of us coming together and really celebrating moms and dads and sending this message out that children are a joy, that they make life better, they make it brighter. There's something so special about children. I just had my first child last year, and I've never found more joy than being a mom. It is just so rewarding, and yes, it comes with challenges, but there's nothing better. She's not an inconvenience. She's everything and more I could have ever dreamed of. So our hope at EveryLife is that people will start celebrating that.
Well, and it is true. There is absolutely nothing that can prepare you for 1 minute this child is not there, and the next minute they're there demanding all of your time. I mean, and it doesn't matter how many books you read, but then you also, so we, I have 4 children, 6 grandchildren. I do, you know, my oldest son was one of those groups that they decided they didn't want to have children. And you know what? That's okay. That's a decision you have to make as a couple. He thought about it for a long time. His wife was in the same camp, and they're on the older end. They're my 40-year-olds. And my daughter was a COVID wedding, and her husband went back to school. She's the youngest, and so they're going to have children after he gets out of school. So I think it is a very different kind of challenge. And I think that social media, in a way, has sent the wrong messages about that. Right. You know, that somehow it's haggard and it's a problem. I tell you, I never thought I'd be a stay-at-home mom. And when I married a man that had 3 children, and then we had a baby, and I went through a couple of nannies, and I just could not deal with the stress of not knowing who was going to show up. And so my husband and I made that decision that, you know what, for a season of my life, I'm going to stay home. And it was a big decision. We sold our house. We moved into something more affordable. We changed our lifestyle pretty dramatically. And the people say, oh, you can't do that today. Yeah, you can. You can do that today if you want to. Okay? Yes, things are more expensive, but my parents thought things were more expensive for me than they were for them. I mean, it's just unfortunately the way things go. And I just think you got to have those conversations. That's why I'm such a fan when people get married, that they have religious-based premarital counseling. Even if they're not that religious, to have a religious-based premarital counseling, because you got to talk about these things.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I think what you're pointing to is the fact that marriage and having children, it takes sacrifice. And I do think that there is another message that young people are buying, that we should all just think about ourselves all the time, and the self-care movement, and it's all about me, and making time for yourself and having me days. And look, I'm not saying that there's not a time and space for that, but I do think that if our whole world becomes about ourselves, then you have to step back and evaluate and say, well, what am I leaving behind? If I were to die today, what is my legacy? And I think we all have to ask that question, no matter how young or old. And so I think that it's beautiful to look and say, what kind of fruit am I leaving? Am I being fruitful? Am I multiplying? What am I leaving behind me? So that's what I see is the gift of children is not only do you get the blessing of raising them, pouring into them, but you also have the assurance knowing that you're securing a next generation of your namesake, which is, again, so amazing and so beautiful. So I am hopeful, Martha, to your point, that more, I believe, young people are looking up and seeing that faith is important, that's what leads and guides us, and that getting married is a gift, and having children is a gift. And so the more that we can be talking about that, I'm so grateful that you even have me on the show, just so we can bring awareness to this issue and the fact that birth rates are declining. They're the lowest they've ever been. Fertility rates are lower than they've ever been. And so we need more Jesus-loving people populating the earth with children. And so we're excited about being in Atlanta, putting the sign up on in Centennial Park, and also doing a diaper drive. We're going to be blessing people at noon tomorrow with free diapers, because we're not just a company that vocally stands for life, but we also put our money where our mouth is, and we give back and we donate our supplies to moms in need who have really embraced and chosen life. So we're excited to be on the ground there tomorrow, and then on the 22nd marching in Georgia. And what a time to be standing for the most precious God's children.
Sarah Gabel Seifert, she's the co-founder and president of EveryLife, the diaper company. If people want to know more about EveryLife, how can they do that?
They can head to everylife.com, and that is a great place to learn more about our Make More Babies campaign, everylife.com. You can also get a bundle of our premium high-performing diapers. They're delivered right to your doorstep. We have an amazing opt-in service where you can edit, change, pause your subscription at any moment. And so I really highly recommend that for moms on the go. It makes getting diapers and wipes much easier. We also have a Buy for a Cause program where maybe you don't have a baby in diapers, but you want to help a mom in need. If you purchase a Buy for a Cause bundle on our website, it's going to go direct to a pregnancy resource center that's in urgent need of diapers and wipes, so they can give it to a family that has embraced life for their child. So lots of ways to get involved in our extraordinary mission at everylife.com.
Sarah Gabel Seifert, thank you so much for being with us today, and I probably will see you tomorrow.
Wonderful. I hope we see you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Joining me right now is Brian Brenberg. He has been with Fox News as a contributor since 2020. He provides financial commentary. He's one of the co-hosts on Fox Business's The Big Money Show, which is weekdays at 1 o'clock. But also he's been on faculty at King's College. He is the chair of the program in business and finance, and we won't hold this against him. He's a double degree holder from Harvard University, an MBA and MPA. Brian, welcome to the program.
Hey, Martha, why did you have to mention that last part? It's just not a convenient time to have that attached to my name.
You know, my cousin went to Harvard and was actually on the ROTC program on the other campus, because, you know, they don't do ROTC. And he kind of had he loved the education he got at Harvard, but he's disappointed in the direction they're going in.
Yeah, it's kind of the same for me. I mean, it was a great experience back when I did it. For a small town kid who'd never been in an environment like that, my eyes were open. I learned a ton, but no, the campus environment now just doesn't seem to be conducive. You know, asking questions about what's going on in the world, having open conversation, and you know, and having kind of a moral compass too. So I grieve it as an alum, but you know. What are you going to do? I had a good experience.
Well, I loved, I've followed your career, and then I saw this piece you did called about embracing diversity. And, you know, diversity sometimes, because people think of it in the terms of DEI, is a word that gets people's interest, right? But what you were talking about was diversity, and that the fact we have this great diversity really opens up opportunity for merit and and this whole discussion around equity, which you can never get equal outcomes. You're never going to get equal outcomes. The only thing you can do is make sure that the playing field is fair so that people can do the best that they can.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, this is sort of counterintuitive for everyone who really embraces all this equity stuff. But the way you get the most real, genuine diversity in the world is to focus on equality of opportunity. Instead of trying to pre-plan who's going to fit into each bucket and who you want to help get ahead, you say, look, we want an even playing field. We want to let people try things. We want entrepreneurs to emerge. I mean, that's where you get, the most diversity that's ever been created in the world has been on the basis of entrepreneurship, people trying new ideas and expanding our horizons. So, yeah, it's in this moment, it's kind of frustrating because I'm a huge fan of different ideas of people on the margins getting a chance to prove their worth. But you can't do that by creating all of these buckets and then saying only this kind of person can go in this bucket and only this kind of person can go in this bucket. I mean, come on. The world can predict the future. Certainly I can't. I don't think anybody in government can. So focus on creating more opportunity and let people show you what might surprise them and what might surprise you as well. That's the real meaning of diversity.
Well, and you're a financial expert, but also it's hard not to underplay the cultural side of this because we live in this world where capitalism, I believe, is the best way to lift more people up. Capitalism kind of needs a moral foundation or else it's just greed. But also we're living in this world where people are a little more risk averse, which isn't good for capitalism. And we also live in a world where we don't let people make mistakes. Do you know what I mean? So by not having everybody do everything they can to cover up their mistakes, and we're a little afraid of risk, we need to get rid of that and reinvigorate capitalism.
Oh absolutely. Yes, we have this stupid idea that the only place you learn is in a classroom. And we've made these classrooms into places where everybody has to feel good and everybody has to pass with an A and nobody can be held accountable to, show up for class or do their work. And anybody who's, lived a decent portion of their life knows actually the places where you learn the most were out in the real world doing things that weren't always quote unquote safe and where you could fail. And in the failures, in things that didn't work out, you tend to learn a lot about who you are and what it takes to make it in the world and maybe ways that you've got to improve. So I am with you. I am so tired of trying to insulate everybody from failure. I'm so tired of not respecting people enough to hold them accountable for the decisions they make. Because, as a human, I want to be respected enough to be held accountable for the decisions I make, including the stupid ones, so I can learn from them. I think the worst place is in student debt relief, student debt handouts. This idea that young people who are adults are taking on debt, and I understand they may not know what they're getting into, but they are adults. It's time to learn that. If you take on debt to go to a school, one of the best educations you're going to get is paying that back because it'll teach you about all the other kinds of debt you could take on in your life someday: credit card debt, home loan debt, auto debt. We're pulling that rug out from under younger generations by telling them, oh, don't worry about it. We'll forgive that debt. Capitalism cannot survive if we do not respect the obligation to pay people back who we borrowed from. Capitalism cannot survive. The only thing that can work in that environment is socialism trending to communism. And that has going back to your first question, that's never been a recipe for real diversity, real entrepreneurship, and certainly real prosperity.
So a couple of things that are in the news today. The first one, this big merger between Capital and Discover, I think. But it's a huge, it makes me a little nervous because it sounds a little bit like some of the things leading up to the 2008 crash. And I know we're not there, okay, but make me feel better about that. I'm a little nervous about this big merger.
Okay, so I'll tell you, I'm not as nervous about the big merger. I understand the business reasons. Capital One, all the Capital One credit cards are all Visa, MasterCard branded cards. So Capital One has to piggyback essentially on the people they like to compete with. They're buying Discover because they don't want to do that anymore. They want to have, or they don't want to do that as much. Discover has its own credit card network working with retailers. Capital One wants that network. So from a business standpoint, I'm not worried about it. I think it probably makes sense for Capital One. But here's where I do agree with you on the worry. Credit card debt in America is rising to very high levels, record high levels again. Delinquencies on credit cards are now increasing at a faster rate. The interest that Americans are paying on credit cards is hitting very high levels because the interest rates are very high. Martha, if you want to find like the spot where you start to get a little nervous, I wouldn't find it in Capital One, hitching up with Discover. I would find it in the fact that more and more Americans are having to go to their credit card to pay for the things you should not be buying on credit card, like your groceries.
Right.
And to me, that's where you have the potential debt bomb, a stressed consumer that can't make their payments. And that's when you could start to see a credit crunch that, would it look as bad as 2008? I hope not. And I'm not predicting that, but that's where I think the potential seed of a problem really is.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm old enough to remember when you could deduct your credit card interest. Okay, I'm dating myself a little bit there, but I was very young and early working at that time, and when they took that away, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because once I couldn't deduct that interest, I was like, what am I paying this interest for? And I got into a habit of paying my cards off every month, and I've stayed in that habit. And so it doesn't matter to me what interest rates are on credit cards. I'm more interested in the perks, right? Because I'm going to pay it off every month anyway. So it works out fine. But final question. We had this Trump case that just happened where he got the $300 and some million judgment against him. And, there's already lots of problems with people not wanting to go to New York right now. I mean, I love New York. My dad was a New Yorker. We used to go there all the time on vacation. I take my children there once a year. I love New York. But I'm concerned about New York right now. And now we're telling business people you might get a $300 million fine.
Yeah, it's funny, Martha. I'm looking out the window of my office, and it's surrounded by these amazing skyscrapers in New York City, the buildings that define this city. And in a place where a judge, without a jury, really without any precedent, and no victim in the case, literally no victim in the case, can say you are on the hook, sir, for $355 million, and you're barred from run or being a director in a company in this state for 3 years. These buildings will not be built. People will not buy them. People will not operate them if you're living under that kind of cloud. And you can say, well, it's just because it's Donald Trump. And that may be true today, but you don't know who the next it's just because of X is, right? Who's going to be the next person who falls out of political favor in this city for saying the wrong thing, believing the wrong thing, and all of a sudden they've got some judge coming after them basically without any constraints on the penalties that he or she can impose. So, yes, this is a much bigger case than Donald Trump. It's a big case for the city, which I live in. I've lived in for 15 years. I want to see it thrive, Martha, but it absolutely cannot thrive as a commercial capital of America if the rule of law essentially has been undermined by ideological, progressive attorneys general, DAs, and judges.
Brian Brenberg, he has a very fun Twitter feed that you should follow, at Brian Brenberg. He also can be found on all the Fox News sites, and appreciate you being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Take care.
It's where North Georgia comes to talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Michael Levine is here with me today, and you know what? A lot of people don't understand really how special Michael Levine is. He is one of those A-list people that doesn't shout it from the rooftops every day. And he has known everybody who is anybody in the entertainment world for the last number of years. I won't say how many. Michael, how are you? You staying dry?
I am well. It is wet here. We've had the last couple of weeks a lot of rain, but we're doing okay. And thank you for that very exceedingly kind introduction.
Well, I mean, it's just true. I see all the little stories that you send out, and it is just amazing. But what I love about you, and I'm sure everybody knows who you are, but you're not out there. You are not out there just about yourself. You are out there for your clients and the things that you do, and I think that's important.
Well, that's a kind thing to say, and I must say that America at this moment in time is not known for its humility. There are eras that societies go through in which humility was considered a great virtue. Today, it's considered, I don't know what, silly or I'm not quite sure. And I don't know all the reasons why, but it's a society that in many ways I don't recognize.
Now, you're also the author of the book, Broken Windows, Broken Business, How the Smallest Remedies Reap the Biggest Rewards. And you can get that book just everywhere. But I noticed this week that you've picked up Rob O'Neill as one of your clients.
I did.
I've had the opportunity to work with him on a couple of projects over the last few years. And if folks may remember that Rob was the person who got Osama bin Laden. But if you talk to him, he'll say he was a part of a team, right? You know, he's that kind of guy. He was a part of a team.
Yes, he is.
That went in there. So tell us about somebody like him, getting somebody like him as one of your clients.
Well, first let me mention my special circumstance. I was born and raised 2.5 miles north of Ground Zero. And so I am one of the few Americans alive who has this distinction of having watched the World Trade Center be built twice. And so I had, when 9/11 occurred, it was very, very personal and to me in a way that maybe it wasn't for others. Now, obviously for New Yorkers it was, but it was very, very impactful. I probably went down over the following 10 years, I probably went down to Ground Zero, I don't know, 50 times. And so when I had the opportunity recently to represent Rob O'Neill, who is the man who shot bin Laden, it was a unique privilege. It shows you never know where your life's going to take you. Rob is an American, maybe a world hero. His behavior, his discipline, his actions ridded the world of not only one of the worst terrorists in the history of humanity, but also a symbol that I think really changed the momentum for a time. Now, so it's a great honor, it's a great distinction, and I feel a very deep sacred responsibility to try to make sure that Rob's messages and ideas and thoughts get carried forward. So thank you for mentioning me.
Yeah, he's just one of the nicest guys. I worked with him on a Media Research Center event, and so got to spend some extended time with him a few years ago, and just a super nice guy, and understood this. People were like in awe of him, okay? He was one of those people that were like, wow, you know, I mean, this is something. But he was so humble because look, when you're part of something like a SEAL team, it is all about team. You know, that's not a fake thing. They don't survive by somebody trying to be the winner, right? They survive because they work as a team.
And listen, when Rob went into that compound, you literally didn't know what was going to happen. You didn't know what room. You didn't know if he was going to be there. You didn't know if what explosives might be there. So the fact that he turned out to be the man who ultimately killed bin Laden is in some part providence, perhaps, and in some part luck, because you went in to that compound literally believing you weren't coming out, and that's quite an experience. And you didn't know what you were going to see. There were kids in that room. There were women in that room. It was dark. You didn't know what was to happen. So it's a miracle in a certain way that things worked out as well as they did.
So the comedian Jon Stewart came back to The Daily Show in the last couple of weeks.
He did.
And
he did.
There's a couple of moments about Jon Stewart that I remember very clearly. One is after 9/11, when he came back, he gave one of the most moving in monologues where he evidently lived in that part of New York and that the World Trade Towers used to be his view outside of his window.
Yep.
And he gave this very emotional speech about, guess what my view is now? And he goes, the Statue of Liberty. You know, they're not going to get us. And he has been such a patriot when it comes to the 9/11 first responders. And you may not like his politics, but Lord knows he put everything on the table for that particular cause. And in his return a couple of weeks ago, he said this most amazing thing, I thought, where he said, the thing I've learned in the 9 years since I've been gone is that it's the regular people that are in the neighborhoods doing the work, being committed to things, are the people that really change things. It's not the people that you think are in charge. And I thought that was great.
Well, yeah. By the way, I should be in full disclosure with you. I did represent Jon Stewart for a time. I knew Jon Stewart. I represented him. He's an interesting and brilliant talent, and he does not hold back. He is a very honest guy, whether you agree with him or not. He shares honest, unfiltered opinion. And I think he's right. I think that there is a tendency to focus on the top when a lot of aspects of American life are born from the bottom up. And, for better and for worse. You know, if you subscribe to the idea that politics is nothing more than downstream culture, right? All politics is the culture you have created downstream. Well, then that would be true for good, and it would be true for bad. There was a culture once in America that created Martin Luther King. And there was a culture in America that's created a lot of the woke insanity of today. And I think Americans have to do a better job at recognizing the problem is not as much the Democrats or the Republicans. The problem is us. We elected these people. We allowed them. We elected them. We permitted them. We celebrated them. And so the problem is us. And until we look in the mirror and take responsibility, you know, when people maybe in Georgia look around at urban cities in America and say, how could they allow this? Well, they did. They elected people like this and then often reelected them. And so we get the government we vote for and we deserve in certain ways.
Well, and then I reread your book, Broken Windows, Broken Business, over the last couple of weeks. And I think that it's very, very much in keeping to it's the small things you get right every day and you fix that are going to make your life better.
Let me give you an example, Martha, of something that I observed that I don't think most Americans observed, and I found it deeply troubling. And I think the consequences to what I'm going to share with you are exactly what we're speaking about. A little thing that will have big consequences, and it went largely unnoticed. Recently, we had a Super Bowl. Okay, Super Bowl, big sporting event, big cultural event in America. Now, during the Super Bowl this year, the NFL made a decision to play 2 national anthems. Okay? So we had our first national anthem. That's the traditional American national anthem that was sung. And then after that, we had a African American or black national anthem. Now, this is a terribly, terribly divisive activity for America's most dynamic cultural event. This is the kind of little thing that it seems somewhat innocuous at first. Oh, Michael, what's the big deal? They played a black national anthem, a lot of African-American football players. What's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with it is it starts to divide a nation. If we have 2 national anthems, why couldn't someone presume that we are 2 nations? And these types of little things that go unnoticed, most people who watch the NFL don't even know it happened. And yet it did. And it's not good. We should get back, I think, to more of the thinking that united us, not divided us. We're not 2 nations. We don't have 2 national anthems. Now, we're made up of many people, but what does that have to do? And by the way, where does it end? If we have 2 national anthems this year at the Super Bowl, next year we can have 3? How about 5? 10 years from now, will we have 10? I mean, where does it end? It's insanity, and it's a small thing, but it has big consequences, in my opinion.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.